Okay, any questions? I know a lot of times people say, well, do you know a good church in XYZ? You know.
There is a term that's thrown around a lot within our culture, which is relationships. How does relationships fit into this whole emerging church issue? And I don't know how they define relationships. They just use a term without ever defining it.
It's true that relationship, communities of faith, that sort of thing is commonly used within the emerging church. And we often hear the expression that the emerging church is just taking Jesus to the community. But in these relationships and taking Jesus to the community, they're bringing other faiths into Christianity. And the relationships that it seems are developing are ecumenical relationships, not the kind of relationship that the Bible teaches, and that is with Jesus, a relationship with Jesus Christ. So there's much within the emerging church that encourages this, as I've already read when they talk about establishing the kingdom, is to find out what Buddhists are doing or others are doing and then incorporate some of their views into a relationship and thus pervert what I believe the church is all about.
Is there a difference between the emerging church and the emergent church?
You hear those two terms expressed, that one is different than the other. Say, I'm not emerging, I'm emergent. But when it comes right down to it, essentially it's to reinvent Christianity in a way that will reach the postmodern era. And in so doing, essentially the word or the truth gets cast out and other ideas get brought in. In my view, there's no difference.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
I have been studying this ever since we had a conference on this about 3 years ago, the emerging church, and read the manuscript that I was very impressed with and sent to a publisher that you quoted here, an evangelical publisher that claimed they have published several books on both sides of the issue. And in the summation, I asked this man, who has personally told me he's a pre-trib position holder and has been a stabilizing influence in that press. Anyway, he said that they don't want to publish any more books on this subject because they think more or less that it's a spent cartridge, that it's going to fade away, that it's just not growing, and that sooner or later it'll sink beneath the sands of time. Do you concur?
Based on the number of books that have been published by, I mentioned one or two publishers, but many different publishers, the vast majority, I can't think of really any by the major publishers that are presenting the other side to the emerging church. It's difficult to find a publisher that will take this on because this movement is so widespread, it's so popular, and it seems that it has been financially quite lucrative. And so personally, I don't see this as a wave that will dissipate based on the numbers of people that it's affected all over the world. I'd like to be able to say the emerging church is another wave that will crash, but I think it'll eventually meld into what I've tried to say here this morning is a preparation for a global spirituality that will be headquarters in Rome and will incorporate Eastern pagan ideas. That's where it's at the present time. I may be wrong if the publishers all of a sudden stop and turn around and publishing critiques against the emerging church, but at the present time, that's not happening.
D.A. Carson, I think, had a book against the emerging church, about 5 or 6 years ago, but I can't think of any others that they've published. And it seems, when you're going through all of this, you wonder why there's this shift to the spiritual kingdom now and a hatred for a future literal kingdom. It's because obviously this fits into the emergent position of a non-literal kingdom or a present spiritual kingdom, and all that kind of stuff. And that's why they almost, I don't know any of the emergent people who, some have said privately, I've heard that they believe what we believe, but none of them preach it, right?
I'm not hearing it.
I haven't heard a word out of any of these people. I saw who was that, Rob Bell thing on eschatology, and he was clearly an idealist, a totally spiritual kingdom and all that kind of stuff.
Roger, I know somewhat of the price you have paid in dealing with this subject, and of course I know somewhat of my own price. The most of the religious leaders of our nation, pastors, teachers, do they understand the level of separation that's going to have to come to those who really hold to the faith, and the price that they're going to have to pay? There will be men and women who will pay some very stiff financial prices for taking a stand. And the scripture you gave us come out of her. Can a person stay within those kinds of movements where that has become dominant and allow themselves to participate and be part of it? What's the price they're going to have to pay? Can we somehow warn people that it may cost? In fact, it always has cost, to be honest, when you really stand on the truth and absolutely refuse to compromise.
I've seen a lot of this emergent stuff blended into youth director stuff. I was told by a Southern Baptist that there are hardly any Southern Baptist youth events that doesn't have emergent elements in it, and that the young people are getting this stuff by the carload. Is that what you found?
Absolutely. Not just here in North America. I just come from Australia, New Zealand. It's there. In fact, it's been in every country I've been in the last several years. And by the way, many of these books have been given away in third world countries, whether it be Cuba or whether you be in South America or Southeast Asia. A lot of the books have been given away to people that can't afford to buy them, which indicates to me that behind this there has to be somewhat of an agenda to, I think, propagate, church growth ideas, teaching methods, which I think it can be traced back to, which I think have been very effective. And I think a lot of pastors and leaders have maybe got into this not fully understanding the whole picture, because they've been told that this method works and that you'll get young people to come. But I think it's a devious teaching that comes can be understood in light of the scriptures. What you're finding today, and I've been in the creation movement for around 30 years, most churches that 25 years ago would have someone like myself come and teach on biblical creation, they don't want to touch it. They said, all the people in our church believe in evolution. We're not interested in Genesis. It's a Babylonian myth. So it's affected the teaching of the entire Bible, and watering down of truth. In fact, replacing truth, I think, with total deception.